and welcome back to the garden on a beautiful August morning. Today I want to talk about my biggest successes and failures so far for the 2022 growing season. My first success is overwintering cool flowers. I started quite a few seedlings in the fall last year and planted them out, hoping to overwinter them for an early spring crop. Now, everything I fall planted this past year was cut flowers, but my biggest successes were in the perennial crops, things like foxgloves and yarrow and a little bit of larkspur, lupins, and most of those all did really well. I only had one larkspur, but it was glorious. A few things that I tried that didn't work out though were stalk and snapdragons, and I know snapdragons will overwinter easily. I'm not sure about the stalk, but they only failed because I started them way too early and they started to bloom before winter even set in. So overall, I'm considering that a success. Next one is Lizzie. Hi, Buster. This was my second year starting Lizzie from seed. The first year they did not survive until planting time, but this year I did. I only started a few and I had 15 plants make it into the ground. They are blooming right now and they are spectacular. Number 3 is my container garden. Now, as of right now, my planting lots of pots video from a few months back is by far the most watched video on this channel. And most of those containers have done so well. I'm considering it a success for sure. What I did not consider, however, which I forget every year, which is how much time it takes to water that many containers every day in the heat of summer. So although it's done really well this year and I have kept up on it, I really need to remember not to plant so many pots in the future. My fourth biggest success was herbs. Now, I've put a lot of time and attention into learning about herbs and growing a lot since I've been bringing them to the farmers market for the last few years. But this year was particularly good for things like dill and cilantro up until the heat of the summer really set in, of course. But tarragon has been fantastic. I have a really nice collection of oreganos and sage and thyme around the greenhouse that are really starting to come into their own this year. And everything that I'm growing in larger quantities have done really well. The mint also, I've been drying a lot of mint. I've made tarragon butter, and I do have a few other things that I plan to do with the herbs as well. And last on our list of successes for this year is squash and pumpkins. Now, not only have they grown really well this year, but I planted them really late. A good majority of my squash and pumpkins and watermelons too, actually, stayed in their pots for way too long. They got pretty root bound. Some of them almost looked completely dead. In addition to those 2 pumpkins, we also have a bush type of delicata squash. We have sweet dumpling squash, I think. We have a few butternuts. And I also have a collection of small decorative pumpkins and gourds, you know, those little ones that you can find for sale in the fall that I plan to bring to the farmers market. And they are starting to really produce a lot. Now, there are a lot of things that I'm really happy with in the garden this year, but those are the 5 major successes. So now I suppose we have to go over the failures. And the major one that we might as well get out of the way first is the dahlia bed. Now, the bed itself, I think, is going to be really good. 2 major problems with this was first that I left the dahlias in pots for way too long because I didn't have time to build the bed until almost July. And the second was that the soil delivery, and you've heard me talk about this before, the soil delivery was bad. I've had a lot of problems with this soil, and I've talked to quite a few people who have been unhappy with soil from this supplier as well. So I have increased the feeding and watering of the dahlias, and they are starting to look a lot better. I'm even starting to get some blooms finally, and they are looking gorgeous. So I do have hope that I'll be able to save the tubers and hopefully have a better year next year. My plan after I dig them out is to dig lots of compost into that bed and maybe some shredded leaves for organic matter, because that is, I think, where it's lacking. And we'll see if we can get that soil fixed up so that we can get a good crop out of that bed for next year. I'm moving around here to try to get those big sunspots off my face. There we go. Here, now Buster has more room. So my second big failure, which is the new bed in the front yard, is the same problem because it's using that same soil. I also didn't keep it watered quite enough, being a brand new bed with brand new seedlings in it. So I think that's going to be an easy fix for next year. Unfortunately, that had all of my cosmos and amaranth and celosia. I had a little patch of green drops, ornamental grass. Now the squash and sunflowers and nasturtiums that I tossed in there, I didn't have much hope for. They were just extra seedlings that I was gonna toss anyway. So my only hope was that they would grow a little bit and cover that soil to try to keep some moisture in. They haven't even really done that. But if we're lucky, we might get another month before the frost sets in, so they might grow a little bit yet. I did, though, get a small crop of sunflowers, which only grew 2 feet tall. They were the tiniest little things, but at least they were usable. My third failure, which is really hitting me hard right now, is succession planting. Now it started off pretty well. My third succession of sunflowers is about to bloom and they are looking gorgeous, but I don't have a whole lot of other things. I am really struggling to make enough bouquets for the farmer's market. I'm selling out every week, which bodes well for next year, but you know, if only I had a little bit more. Now my main garden right here next to me is only about half full. Now it's not a big loss because we've had some rains and I have been direct seeding anything that I can possibly think of that I might get a crop out of. But I'm really not taking advantage of this space as much as I could have. Unfortunately, I would have needed to plan about 2 months ago for that. But you get busy in the garden tending what is growing, and I just forgot at some point to keep sowing to make sure that I had enough. So that is something that I definitely need to do better next year. So my third failure, and I'm still hesitating to call this a failure, but it's the planting in the greenhouse. At first glance, everything looks really, really lush, but it should have a lot more fruit in there. The ginger is not growing as much as it should, and the few herbs that I have on the left-hand side when you first walk in look really wilty every couple of days. And I know it's been hot, but that shouldn't really happen. When I water 6 to 8 watering cans thoroughly in there, and it seems to dry out a lot faster than it has in the last couple of years. I have also seen a couple suspicious looking holes, very small holes, maybe the size of a coin in that area, and I'm thinking I have some sort of creature tunneling around down there, and that's causing the roots to dry out a little faster than it should. So I have increased my watering and it does seem to be making a difference. But I might also have not improved the soil this year as much as I should have. So I think I'm gonna have to dig a little bit more of it out this fall and replace it with a thicker layer of compost. And the last fail for this year, and this is something that happens every year that I have not fixed yet, and that is late season color in my perennial beds. So particularly in the front yard where I have all my ornamental beds, I've stuffed a lot of things in there, a lot of plants that I really love, but I really haven't done a good job at planning what would be in bloom at this point in August and September. So I'm looking around now to see what's in bloom in other people's gardens in my area and see if I can get my hands on some seed to grow some things from seed next year. This is also something that I could fill in with annuals. I just didn't really grow a lot of annuals that were purely decorative this year. Everything that I grew was mostly for herbs, vegetables, or cut flowers. So I think this is going to be something easy to fix. I just have to plan ahead. So that is everything that was on my list. Those are my successes and failures for the 2022 growing season. And of course, there are a lot of little things, but those are the most important things that I'm making sure I write down and have a plan to do better for it next year. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love to see you subscribe. Make sure that you hit that like button on the video as well. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time. Happy gardening.